You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am the grumpy old boomer half of our recording duo here, Jim, and with me as always is my partner,
Rocco.
Not nearly as much of a boomer, but never as entertaining as me is all I'm saying. But luckily, we have a friend back on the show with us today. We have Jo Walker, the director of Jo Walker Designs, back with us to talk about her experiences with architectural renderings and the good and the bad of using them. So thanks for being back with us, Jo.
Well, thanks for having me again.
It's always a pleasure. Hey, you know what? Once you get stuck with us, you're stuck permanently. There's no way, no escape.
I'm loyal no matter what.
That we appreciate.
Yes. So.
All right. Awesome. So, so today we're going to be talking about the reality of renderings. And that's why we have Jo on, because Jo's definitely got some opinions and she's not shy about sharing. So, Jo, why don't you start us off today by telling our listeners a little bit about your background and what you do on a daily basis in the design world and kind of how that all plays into today's topic.
Okay, so it's a funny thing about this because before I ever came to three-dimensional design, architecture, and all of that, I was a graphic designer. And that puts me in a really interesting place in terms of visualizations and how all of that works. And for many, many years, I was a graphic designer. Then I got into museum and exhibit design, which is kind of a logical segue from like just straight on the page to space. And then I went and got a master's degree and I became an architect. Okay, fine. So
that was a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't no big thing, right?
No, not a big deal. So here's the deal. It's like, especially, I have been dealing with how to represent three-dimensional space and the difficulties of that really almost since I stepped away from graphics. And that's going to be in the early 90s. I mean, a long time. So I have a lot of experience with this and I have a lot of thoughts about it. So that's my story. What do I do now? I basically I take on very small projects now. I'm really tired of doing the big things like I did World Trade Center Museum. I've done a lot of really huge projects, especially here in New York. And now I just really take on jobs that interest me. And that is a beautiful thing because it means that I can really drive the bus in a really specific way.
It's nice when you get to that point in life where you can pick and choose what it is you want to do instead of what you have to do to put meals on the table.
I decided that I didn't want to kill anybody and I didn't really want to have any heart attacks. So it kind of,
That works out well. That's a good thing. We're all appreciative of that.
Yeah, it's good for me anyway.
There you go. Cool. All right. So in my idea, right, when it comes to renderings, whether they're digital or manually created with models or paints or markers or any other artistic medium, we have been told time and time again that they're always good things. We hear phrases like, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And from that, we're expected to see the absolute logic of why rendering for our projects are, they're absolute must-haves. The implication, I guess, is that anyone with even a bit of sense knows that you should have a rendering for every job you do. And I think that, the reality of that is a little bit different. If this was a truly a positive on every project, we'd see them done on every job, but we don't. There are a lot of potential negatives and issues that can come from the rendering process. And that's really where I want to focus on the first half of today's show. We always hear from the marketing people, right? Who almost always work for the rendering software companies, about how beneficial this process is. But I really want to look a bit at the flip side and see if there are problems here as well. So Joe, let's start with potential project related issues that can come from a rendering. Have you run into instances where a rendering presented to the client or to the public actually caused problems on one of your jobs?
Oh my Lord. Oh my Lord. Let me just tell you. I had a project in Asia, a museum that I was working on in Asia, a very demanding client. And at the beginning, we weren't even in schematic design. Okay. We didn't even really have a program nailed down, right? And he turned to me and he said, "Don't show me anything I can't actually have." Now, let me just say that what he was saying was, do not show me a pretty picture rendering that you can't actually build and give me exactly what that looks like. Because if you do that, I'm not paying your bill. Now, well, the problem, let me just say, the problem with all of this is, I think there's two different things to be talking about here myself. One is rendering and one is visualization, and they aren't the same thing. So I can, let me just say, kind of as a structure, when we design a space or a building, anything really, you start with a program, you start with what the problem is, you do conceptual design, and then you do schematic, and then you do design development, and then you do, construction documents or final design drawings. The problem is when you're talking about a rendering, which we really are talking about a photorealistic rendering, you are going from 0 to 60 in a nanosecond. You haven't gone through the design process. You don't know what in the hell you're drawing at all. You probably don't even understand how the massing of the thing works in the very beginning, but you're pushed to visualize a thing before you actually really know what it is. And now you've sold the client something that may or may not be feasible. Now, in the old days, here I am. In the old days, it used to be, we would build what we called a massing model, a physical white model that didn't talk about finishes or materials or sunlight or any of that stuff. It was just like, here's kind of what the mass of the building or project or space is going to look like. And then you might draw some very simple elevations and throw some color on those elevations just to give a sense of what you were maybe thinking about. We don't have the luxury anymore of what we're maybe thinking about. You get nailed down into something very, very specific, way, way too early in the design process. And now you have to tangle with your clients to try to get them to be flexible, which generally speaking, when there's money on the table, they're not. So that's where I live. I'm not against visualization, but I think we've lost the sense of a process. Well, while we have a process in physically making these buildings or these spaces possible, we've let go of the process of how we communicate that process with the client. And it puts design in the worst position you can imagine.
Okay, so that actually kind of feeds into my next point. Really, it's a good segue, right? The big benefit that I see touted all the time about renderings, right, is that they help non-design folks kind of visualize the final outcome of your project. The claim is that people are going to be less apt to resist changes and new construction when they can see, right, what the true impact of the design will be in some sort of a visual medium. I've even heard it said that showing your client the rendered space that you're working in, it helps push their imagination and can lead to better interaction between you, the designer, and the client, so that you get more creative input from them, which leads to better results. The idea, I guess, is to give the non-professional person an interface, right, where they can add their own ideas to the design process. And I think on the surface that sounds like a good thing. So, Joe, what's the potential negative of having that client?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to say a bad thing right now, but you know me, I'm not shy about saying awful things. Most clients have zero imagination. They can't visualize. If they could visualize, they'd be doing something other than what they do. So they are very, very literal with what they see in front of them. I'm not kidding you. It is like scary how literal they are. If a white tile wall renders out slightly beige, they're thinking, but wait, I don't want beige tile. It's the problem with these photorealistic renderings is that they're photorealistic and clients, if they can't imagine. So here's the thing, and back in the day, again, and I'm sorry because I'm a dinosaur and I've said it before and I will say it again, we used to do, for example, watercolor renderings, okay? And they were indicative of what the energy and the characteristic of the space was, but they weren't down to how big the tile modules were, what the grout joints were, what the fabric on the chairs were. It was never specific like that. So what happened in that sense is that a client was brought into the romance of making the space. There was something very imaginative and very romantic about that. And you would get a client on board with the process, not with the thing, if that makes any sense at all. And I believe that renderings are critical. I think that when you get to let's say you're at 100% design development, you think you've really solved the majority of your problems. I think that is the time when you do a really good photorealistic rendering. You sit down with your renderer, who typically is not the person who's designing the building, which is another problem, but you sit down with that renderer and you've got a pretty good chance that what's going to come out of their computer is pretty close to what you've worked through.
Right. Which is a fair statement, right? So you said it's that concept of too many cooks in the kitchen, and one of the cooks has no taste buds at all. So
yeah, look, you have to always communicate with your clients. I have this wonderful client. He just has called me back to do spaces for him many, many times. He says, I'm one of his best friends. He says, but you're my most expensive friend because if I pick up the phone and call you, it's going to cost me at least $20,000. He makes me laugh every time. The thing is, he's not wrong. But anyway, he doesn't have the best taste in the world. And he kind of knows it, which is why he calls me. And he's learned to rely on me listening to what it is he says he wants, and me actually understanding from the design point of view how to give him that without it being like, oh, please, Steve, I wish we had never done this. So you have to communicate with your client. You need tools to communicate with your client, but photorealistic tools too early on in the game really make somebody take their rendering over to their wife or their husband or whatever and say, well, I'd really rather have gold fixtures in the bathroom than silver, when you're not even talking about that right now.
Yeah, you haven't even figured out where the bathrooms are going yet. I think fixtures can hold off for a little while.
Yeah, right? So and that's the problem. And it's a big problem because photorealistic, they think that all the design issues are solved.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So Rocco, let's wake you up and bring you in here. So I keep putting him to sleep. He just dozes over there in the corner.
Well, and me too.
So we do a bunch of work here at Zentek, right, around rendering software and training on it. Do you see this as a big need that designers really want for getting these renderings done, or are they kind of dragging their feet and only go into renderings and this kind of a presentation when they have to?
I think I've seen the interest in rendering from our perspective, right, from the consulting and training standpoint, diminish over time. We certainly can help customers with it, but I think part of it's that the software, from the technology standpoint, it just becomes so much easier to use. I mean, they build all these fancy tools within these products. So once they get the core concept of how to use them, they just learn how to use the features. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it becomes an automated point and click process, which is part of the issue that I want to get to today, because that is really part of the problem, at least from my standpoint, of where I tend to lean a little bit in Joe's direction on the renderings. That, yeah, I'll get to that later. But, so, the other really big, possibly negative issue that I see personally with renderings, I guess, is one of cost, right? Renderings, right? Whether they're computer or they're hand created, there's an investment there in time and materials and effort that just you have to accept it. You're going to have to dedicate dozens of hours of time or even more to creating.
Not dozens, hundreds.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot of effort that goes into this, for creating renderings, and you need to consider how are you going to address updates and changes and revisions. As like Joe said, right, the overall design process is going to change because we're not there yet. We're still moving through the project lifecycle. And you have to make this decision about, do you do a rendering early on in the project in order to get buy-in, knowing that the design is going to dramatically change, all right? And what do you do when that change happens, right? Do you go back and redo the rendering and put in another couple of 100 hours doing that? Or do you just leave that out-of-date one as kind of a, it's good enough representation? Or, like Joe was saying, you can opt to wait until the final design is complete to get an accurate rendering. But what benefit does that provide at that point if the design's been done already through traditional construction documents? Right? And that's the struggle. And it's part of the rendering process that those marketing folks never want to talk about. All right, and that's why we have Joe here to get an honest answer. So, Joe, what are your thoughts here? When is it worthwhile to do a rendering, and when is it just a waste of time and resources?
Well, like I said before, I think there's this idea of visualizing versus rendering, and I think that early on, you do massing and all of those things. You have to do that because you have to get the client to understand sort of physically what you're thinking about. But I really believe that before you start construction documents, when you get to the end of design development, or let's say 75% design development, when you pretty much know what the thing is, you might not have worked out all the details, but you got a pretty good idea what it is. That's when you should sit down, do a really good tight rendering. And that actually gets the client to buy in to, yes, this is what we're doing. Because when you have to change that stuff in construction documents, it's too late. It's very, very late. And also at the end of design development, also that's when you're getting pricing. And if you have those renderings at the pricing phase, it also really helps whoever's trying to put those numbers together really get an idea of what you're doing. Again, because so many people in the industry now just have forgotten how to visualize. They just mostly don't do it. So I think that I don't mean to say that renderings are never useful. When we did the World Trade Center Museum, I cannot tell you how many times we re-rendered some of those spaces. And let me just say, if you want to watch a fee go down the toilet, that's a really great way to watch it. Because really, by the time, if you start rendering early on in the job, you have spent your entire design fee before you've even hit design development. And firms hope to make it up in construction documents. But if there are too many changes because you have spent all of your energy on renderings, believe me, you're going to lose your shirt. And people do.
No, I've seen it happen. It's an absolutely valid point. So, okay. All right. So why don't we take a quick break here so we can hear from today's sponsor. And when we get back, I want to look at more of the positive side of this topic. All right. So, all right, folks, stand by. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. Today's Cattle Call Podcast is being brought to you by BricsCAD, the latest and greatest CAD software out there on the market today. It's growing by leaps and bounds, and the beauty of it is that BricsCAD allows you to use all of your current drawing files, all of the CAD commands and macros and features and Lisp routines and customizations and configurations that you've already developed, right? Without any transition. Your people can be up and running in BricsCAD in a matter of hours, right? So to help you make that transition here at Zentex, one of the things that we've done is we have actually created a Make the Move to BricsCAD program to help you move from your Autodesk-based platform over into BricsCAD with minimal time and risk and investment. And Rocco is going to tell you all about it. Rocco?
I'm going to tell you all about it. Well, there's a great deal of information that's available right on our website. It's zentechconsultants.net. You can reach out to us at sales@zentechconsultants.net or give us a call, 866-824-4459. But yeah, that's the core idea behind it, Jim. If you're an AutoCAD user and you're looking to make the move to BricsCAD, we're here to help make an easier transition for you. So check us out. Let us know how we can help you.
Perfect answer. BricsCAD, the smartest CAD system on the market today. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast, where we are talking with Joe Walker, today's expert guest and a recurring friend of the show. We're talking about all the pros and cons of design renderings. And in the first half, I focused on kind of the negatives of this topic. But, I like to end our shows on positive notes. Working with Rocco, that's a big enough Debbie Downer, right? I don't need any more in my life.
Rocco, you gotta fight back. You gotta fight back. Come on.
There go the wheels of the bus.
There you go. They're going round and round. Now that song is stuck in your head for the rest of the day. So, all right. So, but with that in mind, I did want to look at when renderings are a good thing and what benefits they can actually bring to your projects. So Joe, let's start with that basic question, right? Is there a real benefit to renderings, and when or where do you think that they bring actual benefit to your design projects?
Yes, there is benefit. There absolutely is benefit. And I'm going to shift over rather than talking about architecture and buildings. Let me talk about exhibit and museum design, where really one of the great things that a rendering can do is it can really give the client what the user experience is going to be in that space, like just through fly-throughs or walkthroughs that are rendered with lighting the way it's going to be and video running and graphics and interactives and all those sorts of things. Really, the life of that space, which is impossible to describe in architectural drawings. It is a great, great, great way to describe that and get a client's buy-in on that. That said, it is a very expensive process, so you have to be, I think, pretty far down the pipeline in terms of design before you really do that. But especially with exhibits and museums, the client or the user experience is really central to the whole thing. And it's great to be able to visualize that and to feel very clear that what you've done, and for the client to feel clear that what you've created actually solves the design problems, will benefit the customers and people that are, the users of that museum or that exhibit, and create the learning experience that you want people to have when they come through a space. So there's absolutely places for it, for sure. For sure. We used to struggle on trying to express that stuff before we had the computer tools to do it.
Right. Yeah. All right. That's good. Actually, I didn't even really thought about that in terms of museum setup, but I see what you're saying. That could be that's priceless in that kind of an environment.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So, another area I think that I've seen, a lot of folks make real good use of renderings is in corporate marketing. The design world is just uber competitive nowadays. We all know that. And anything that a company can do to highlight their skill set and differentiate yourself from your competition it's vital. Renderings really do shine, I think, in this respect, right? Being able to show, beautiful renderings of your designs on your website and in your marketing sense, it can really help show your potential clients what your capabilities are and also what your overall design aesthetic may be. The renderings, they can be passed through social media channels and help you build, a very serious, professional looking brand. and build
Right.
awareness for who you are. So, Joe, do you use rendering as part of your own marketing?
Yes, I actually have. Even on my little design website, I have some renderings of small projects that I've done. The thing that clients, I will tell you, the thing that they're most interested in seeing, though, and this is very interesting, is they want to, here's the rendering, there it is, and then they want to see the same view of the actual finished constructed project to see,
Yeah.
did you hit what you were trying to do?
Yeah, coming back to the
Because-
same concept of, it was in the picture, did you get it there? Like it must match flawlessly.
Exactly. It is, you can visualize, but can you make it real? And that's the thing. So, and the issue of that also is, and small firms don't have these marketing departments because they just can't afford it. Basically, if you're going to do those kind of renderings, and it's not just the renderings, then you've got to Photoshop them afterwards and sweeten them. And, there's just all kinds of stuff you have to do. Really, it's prohibitively expensive, and firms, you just have to eat it. You eat it. So, if you don't have a marketing department, most of the time, you're probably going to try to put photographs of your finished projects up on your website rather than renderings of stuff that may or may not have ever been built.
Right. Okay, and that's fair. And it kind of answered one of the other questions I was going to ask you, which was, is there a way to pass at least some of that expense to the client who you did the job for, or you just got to eat it whole?
I think you eat it whole. Honestly, I think when you put a budget together for a job, either you're working on a percent of construction or you're on some kind of a flat fee, and you try to figure out what you think you're going to end up doing as far as renderings and visualizations. You never, ever, ever allow enough money for that. You just never do. And it just starts to really eat into your design fee. And that's just the nature of the game. And so, pretty much firms end up eating it. That's what they do. And a lot of times what happens is you'll get really, really junior staff who know the programs extraordinarily well doing the rendering work because they're affordable, but they don't really know much about building or construction. And so you have, it really creates some problems. It does.
And I agree with that 100%. It's actually kind of the next point that I wanted to make, because I think there's a real important concept that our listeners should consider here. Particularly as it relates, like Joe was saying, to the computer-generated, software-generated renderings. When you have 3D and BIM designs, it's a much easier process, right, to update your renderings, and it's also much more cost-effective to do those intermediate rendering changes across the design life cycle, even though it is still crazy expensive. Mainly because you can choose that level of detail and go with conceptual versus photorealistic, or like Joe was saying before, visualization versus rendering. And you can manage those costs a lot more effectively, I think, even though, like I said, they're always going to be more than you expect. And you also have the ability to choose to render, like I said, only the physical building or the site, etc., whatever you're working on, or to incorporate fully developed scenes with people and vegetation and cars and such. And in that respect, I think there's a distinct benefit to using the computer as your primary tool. All right, though I will point out, because I'm going to get into this in a few minutes, that choice is strictly one of cost, and it's not necessarily good for your actual aesthetics and presentation. So, Joe, what's your opinion of computer-generated renderings?
Well, here's my problem. I mean, I think of them now as a necessary evil. I find that they lack juice. I don't know a better way to say it. Everything in the world of computer-generated rendering looks flat to me, and I don't care. They all look like it's generated out of the same system with the same program and the same lighting and the same materials libraries, and they just don't have character. And that I find that I personally find that a little heartbreaking, because there is art in all of this, and it sort of reduces it to something that's much flatter than that. So also I have to say, yes, it is true with BIM and 3D design that you have the bones of being able to do the renderings, but the designer or the architect who is actually sitting and making the construction of the building, he's not going to be, or she's not going to be the person that's going to generate those renderings, because they just don't have time to tweak light and finishes and all of that stuff. So it's still getting handed off to somebody who doesn't really know as much as you wish they did.
Yeah, there's too much, like Rocco was saying earlier, in that, you know, with the new fancy software, it's all integrated. It's this concept of push button completion, and it really does not do the job. So actually, you know, Rocco, I did want to ask you a question before we move off this topic and kind of get into the art side of things, which I think is important. What do you think, Rocco? I mean, what did we see? I mean, most of the clients are they looking to handle renderings internally, or are they going externally? And are they really more focused on the actual job and the project for the client, or do we find that they're doing more of it towards, you know, like we were saying, like towards the corporate marketing? Where's the industry standing here?
I think they try to do it internally. I think they try to use the tools that are built into the software itself. And, you know, to Joe's point, you don't have it's not, you know, it's like a static output, you know, it's not extremely visually pleasing, but they do it because the software has easy to use built-in tools, and you know, going out to marketing, and most companies don't have a built-in marketing department. You know, outsourcing it can be expensive, so they try to make do with what's built in.
Yeah, and it never does it. But both of you guys have led into my big final point, and kind of where I wanted to go with this. Listen, for, you know, all my listeners out here, I want to point out that I am, and I always will be, a huge fan of artwork. You know, listen, while I understand the ease and I make my living using computers as a tool, I have to say that I agree 100% with what Joe and Rocco were saying, that the thing that bothers me greatly with this process is the way that it makes your presentation seem stale and generic. You know, there's a distinct part of any design, but particularly in architecture, that should always be tied to art. All right? And I think there's been a distancing from that in recent years, right? Renderings are often seen as nowadays anyway, as something that's, like we're saying, push button, created by the computer guy who gets the lowest salary by clicking a button, all right, instead of by industrial or architectural artisans. Listen, I'm not saying that hand-drawn is always better than computer-generated, but I think that hand-drawn absolutely requires an actual artist, and that all too often the artist is removed from that computer-generated model in an attempt to save money. All right? And I think that leads to inferior output and really disappointing results. And I really do believe, folks, that whichever medium you opt for, the key to this is you need to use people who have the artistic capacity and the integrity to get that output that you're really looking for. It doesn't matter which medium they use. They've got to be artists trying to get a true artistic presentation. So Joe, where do you stand on kind of the hand-drawn versus computer-rendered question? Do you have a personal preference?
I do. You know, I have to say that I myself am a big fan of the watercolor rendering, because I just think there's just nothing more beautiful than that. Granted, though, that, you know, there's not many Tom Schallers in the world, and so you just, you know, those people now are really hard to come by. Now, I worked in a firm once where this one senior architect would turn to someone and say, "What do you mean it's a problem? All you have to do is push a button."
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a big red easy button. It finishes the job.
Yes, it's the easy button. You just push the button. So, and here's the thing. I did this project. It was a really major theater in Los Angeles, a big deal project. We had worked on the renderings. I'd sat down, worked with the person that was working in the computer and everything. We flew off from New York to LA. and they overnighted they FedExed the final renderings, mounted, 24 by 36, mounted, blah, blah, blah. I go down to the lobby of the hotel. I open the package of the drawings, and let me just tell you, there was no way I was showing that client those drawings. And the renderer had done, in a sense, she had done what we had asked her to, but she then went she just went a little bit off the farm. I just don't know a better way to say it. And when you're on deadline and on schedule, it just, a lot of things happen. And it's like, oh, great, just FedEx them and we'll be fine in the morning. And I walked into this major, major, major presentation. I had the drawings under my arm. And there was a question, well, are we going to try to punt? And I put them on the easel and I turned them around backwards. And I said, I did. I said, I can show you these drawings of this theater, but what I'd rather do is tell you a story. And I told them the story of what it would mean to walk through this space. And they bought the job. If I had shown them those drawings, there's no way in hell we would have gotten that project.
Yeah, and that's that level of artistry that goes into it.
Exactly.
And artistry isn't always, it's not always visual, right?
It is not. The thing is, people think it's about knowing how to use the software, but it's really about knowing how to use your eyes and your heart and your spirit.
And I know that sounds new agey and like, and I guarantee there are people listening to the podcast right now like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, they're rolling their eyes. Oh, come on, I just need to get it done and get it out and save money. And I say, yeah.
Well, you do. Okay, I get it. And you do. I got it. But it's not, it makes people like me get out of the industry in a certain way, because the art, which is the thing that I fell in love with in this industry, as the more it falls by the wayside, the less I want to be involved. And
I think that your story kind of underscores exactly the point that I was trying to make, in that, all art, and it doesn't matter whether it's a book or a film or music or architecture or graphic design, whatever it is, when you're creating art of some kind, the whole purpose of it is exactly what you said. It's to communicate emotion. That's what it all boils down to. And if you do not have art in these presentations for this rendering structure, you're removing all potential emotion and feeling from your structure, right? There's no way that you can get those awe-inspiring spaces that you're looking for, where you want to, motivate the workers, and you want to have people looking at it from the outside and going, wow, that's the Flatiron Building. Look at that thing. Everybody knows that, right? You can see it on TV. You know instantly what it is. That doesn't happen anymore. We're generating, McBoxes is what we're building here.
Yeah, it's just like the world is degenerating into just crappy shopping malls and really insipid office buildings, and no place. Why do you think people are thrilled to be working at home? Who wants to be in those spaces? Right? And they've all been drawn and rendered and photoshopped, and it's not like anybody didn't know that's what they were going to get. So, there's something about the wanting to sort of rekindle the notion of art in all of this. And really, I have a friend in Toronto. She is a painter, a really great painter. And what she does for a living is she does photo renderings for an architectural firm. And they're gorgeous because she's got the flair,
Yeah, it's not about the tools. It's not about the computer. It's about the person guiding it. That's all it is. The computer is just another art brush, just an electronic one. That's all it is. So, all right. So I want to give Jo one last chance here to get up on her soapbox and tell us what her overall take is on this whole topic. So, Jo, what is one last thought that you'd like to leave the listeners with on today's topic?
I really believe, visualizing is a key part of what we do. It's just, you're asking somebody to spend millions of dollars on something and they don't understand what it is. So you really need to visualize. That's true. But I would be a much happier person if we accepted the same process that we go through to create construction drawings, which is conceptual design, schematic design, design development, final drawings. If we approached rendering or visualizing in the same way, where we went from very simple massing and those sorts of things all the way to a finished rendering when we're actually ready and prepared to do that. And it's right now we're backwards, and they, we really are pressured to start out with a fully visualized project way, way, way too early in the process. And that's the thing that I wish that we could find a way to work with our clients better, to have trust, to have communication, to have collaboration, so that the process can develop, rather than we have a picture and now we've got to make this thing look like that.
Well said. I agree 100%. So, all right. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up here for today. And I want to thank Joe for being here with us yet again. Joe, you're always a pleasure to have on. We always know we're going to get honest opinions from you.
Yeah, it's like, you got to have a dinosaur on here every now and again.
Well, I'm the boomer, you're the dinosaur, and Rocco's the stick in the mud. So it works out. Joe, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
All right, we're going to bounce out of here, folks, and we will catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.